Welcome back to City Stories. Before we dive into today's powerful African folktale, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this story with your friends. Every story we tell here carries wisdom, culture, and lessons that still matter today. Now, let me take you to the quiet shores of Lake Victoria, where a poor fisherman named Ombare once met destiny and lost it. Long ago, in the humble village of Nyamgodho, where the winds whispered through papyrus reeds and the waters of Lake Victoria stretched endlessly into the horizon, lived a man named Ombare. Ombare was a fisherman, but not just any fisherman. He was poor, painfully poor. Every morning before the sun rose, while the sky still held the last stars of night, Ombare would push his small, worn-out canoe into the lake. His nets were patched in many places, tied together with knots that told stories of desperation. Some days he returned with a few fish, barely enough to eat. Other days, nothing at all. Hunger was his closest companion, loneliness his shadow. Villagers often whispered about him. "Poor Ombare," they would say, "the lake has forgotten him." But Ombare never gave up. The lake was all he knew. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the waters gold and red, Ombare cast his net one final time before heading home. The lake was unusually quiet. No birds, no waves, just silence. He waited and waited. Then suddenly, his net jerked violently. Ombare's heart raced. "This must be the biggest catch of my life," he exclaimed. With all his strength, he pulled the net toward his canoe. It was heavy, far heavier than any fish he had ever caught. Struggling, sweating, trembling, he finally dragged it into the boat. But what he saw made his blood run cold. Inside the net was not a fish. It was a woman. She was unlike any woman Ombare had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like water under moonlight. Her eyes were deep, ancient, like they held secrets of the lake itself. Ombare stumbled backward in fear. Who are you?" he stammered. Nyamgodho looked at him calmly. "My name is Nyamgodho," she said softly. Her voice sounded like ripples on water. "Please, do not be afraid." Ombare's hands shook. "How did you get into my net?" Nyamgodho sighed gently. "The lake chose you, Ombare." At the sound of his name, his fear deepened. "How do you know me?" "I know many things," she replied, "but listen carefully. If you take me to your home, I will change your life. I will give you wealth beyond your imagination." Ombare hesitated. This could be a spirit, a curse, a trick. But then he thought of his empty stomach, his broken home, his hopeless life. "What choice do I have?" he muttered. He looked at her again. "All right, I will take you home." Nyamgodho smiled faintly. From that day, she lived with Ombare. At first, nothing seems to change. Days passed. Ombare still fished, still struggled, still doubted, until one morning, Nyamgodho spoke. "Ombare," she said, "prepare a large place near your home." "For what?" he asked. "For cattle, goats, sheep, ducks, chickens." Ombare laughed bitterly. "Nyamgodho, look at me. I don't even have enough to feed myself." "Do as I say," she replied calmly. Something in her voice made him obey. So Ombare worked. He cleared land, built enclosures, repaired fences. Villagers mocked him. Has poverty finally made him mad? They laughed. But Ombare ignored them. He finished the work. The next day, Nyamgodho said, "Come with me to the lake." They walked together in silence. When they reached the shore, Nyamgodho took out a small horn. She raised it to her lips and blew. The sound echoed across the water. At first, nothing happened. Then, the lake began to move. Ripples turned into waves. The waves grew larger, louder, and then something unbelievable happened. From the water emerged animals, hundreds of them. Cattle, goats, sheep, ducks, chickens. They walked out of the lake as if it were land. Ombare stood frozen. "Am I dreaming?" he whispered. The animals gathered and followed Nyamgodho and Ombare all the way back home. By sunset, Ombare was no longer poor. He was rich. News spread quickly. Ombare is now the richest man in Yandiwa. People came from far and wide to see his wealth. His compound was filled with animals. His granaries overflowed. His home grew larger. For the first time in his life, Ombare knew comfort. But with wealth came change. At first, Ombare was grateful. He respected Nyamgodho. He treated her kindly. But slowly, something shifted. He began spending more time with other wealthy men. He drank. He boasted. He forgot the days of hunger. And most dangerously, he forgot who had changed his life. One night, Ombare came home drunk. Nyamgodho was waiting. "You are late," she said calmly. Ombare laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha ha, I am a rich man now. I go where I want." Nyamgodho watched him quietly. Days passed and his behavior worsened. He came home late every night, drunk, angry. One evening he shouted at her, You useless woman, I found you in the lake like nothing." Nyamgodho's eyes darkened. "Ombare, be careful." But he didn't listen. He insulted her again and again and again. Soon, words turned into blows. The man who once had nothing now abused the very person who gave him everything. One quiet night, Nyamgodho spoke firmly. "Ombare, this must stop." He scoffed. "Or what? You will go back to the lake?" She looked at him deeply. "Yes." He laughed. "Go. I don't need you anymore." Those words sealed his fate. The next morning, Nyamgodho awoke early. She stepped outside and looked at the sky. Without a word, she began walking toward the lake. As she walked, something strange happened. The animals began to follow her. All of them. Cattle, goats, sheep, ducks, chickens, everything. Ombare noticed. At first, he was confused. Then, panic set in. "Where are they going?" he shouted. He ran after them. At the lake shore, Nyamgodho stood still. The animals began walking into the water. One by one, they disappeared beneath the surface. "No! Stop!" Ombare screamed. He fell to his knees. "Nyamgodho, please forgive me." Tears streamed down his face. "I was wrong. Don't leave me." Nyamgodho turned slowly. "It is too late, Ombare." Her voice was calm but final. "You forgot who you were. You forgot what matters." "I will change, I promise," he cried. She shook her head. "Wealth is a gift, not a right." The last animal vanished into the lake. Ombare reached out helplessly. His wealth? Gone. Nyamgodho stepped into the water and slowly disappeared beneath the surface of the lake. Ombare remained behind, alone, broken, and desperate. No, this cannot be happening," he whispered. He stood there for a long time, staring at the water that had swallowed everything he once owned. Days passed. Ombare stopped eating. He stopped speaking to people. Every day he returned to the lake, sitting at the exact spot where Nyamgodho had vanished. He called her name, begged, cried, but the lake remained silent. One evening, as the sun set just like the day he first caught her, Ombare walked slowly into the shallow waters. "Oh, Nyamgodho, forgive me," he whispered. The wind blew gently. The water rippled softly around him. And then something began to change. His feet grew heavy. He tried to move, but he couldn't. His legs stiffened. His skin hardened. "Ombare," he whispered to himself, realizing too late. His arms stretched outwards, becoming rigid. His fingers spread and twisted like branches. His body rooted itself into the earth beneath the water. Slowly, painfully, silently, Ombare turned into a tree. A tall, lonely tree standing at the edge of the lake, forever watching, forever remembering. Villagers later found the tree. They whispered among themselves, "That must be Ombare." Some said they could still hear his voice in the wind. Others said the tree wept during the night. But everyone agreed on one thing. The lake had taken back what it gave. Ombare was once poor, then rich, then nothing again. But his greatest loss was not wealth. It was respect. It was gratitude. It was love. And now he stood as a tree, a warning to all who forget where they come from. And that, my friends, is the story of Ombare and Nyamgodho. If this story taught you something about respect, gratitude, and humility, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. What lesson did you learn from Ombare's story? This is City Stories, where every story has a meaning. See you in the next one.